Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, I'm Keely, and you're listening to Flowers and Folklore. If you love flowers and folklore and odd floral facts, then you are in the right place.
Reading and learning about flowers, their history, and folk tales associated with them is a big hobby of ours. There's so many regional stories and lore for each flower, so you may have read or heard something different. You're absolutely welcome to get in touch and share the stories you know. We'll share the best way to get in touch at the end of the episode. Keely, I'm so excited for this episode.
Me too. I feel like this one has been talked about for quite a while.
Yeah, so this is the first episode that I ever researched, and I think I maybe even recorded it one or two times. So this was back in, I think maybe even 2022, when I first had the idea for this podcast. This was going to be the first episode. So the blurb, I think on Spotify and places like that, for this podcast, it talks about if you want to know why what bluebells ringing actually means. That was like one of the taglines that I used. But then the episode never came out because I was just so scared and I wanted to keep it quite seasonal as well. So then what I can't even remember what the first episode ended up being about, but it was like well after spring. And so it feels really high stakes. And I know it's like stakes that I've set myself because it's now 2026. But yeah, I'm really excited to share this with you. I've put loads of pressure on myself and I hope it's really good.
Do you know what? I think you're going to feel so good post Bluebell's episode once it's actually out there because it's been hanging over your head now for so long. It's just become this thing. It's growing its own little mythology itself. So it's time to get this thing done.
Yeah, that's so valid. And we had intended to record an episode last month, and life just really got in the way for both of us. If I sound a little bit echoey, it's because I've just cleared out the studio yesterday because I'm now moving to a new studio space. So the room I'm currently in is my spare room, and for the last 5 years, I've been doing all my flowers here, which is bonkers. So this room is now going to be a shared office space for me and Scott. So hopefully for the next episode, I'll be less echoey because there'll be more stuff in here. So it does feel very surreal being here, but I've just been burning the candle at both ends. And so Keely and I are so committed to the podcast. And I know there was like a month break, but even if we have to take a break because life gets in the way, we're sticking with this. There's going to be flowers and folklore for a good long time.
We have too many episodes to walk away from. Like, there's too many ideas. If you could see our folders bursting with ideas, there, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. Just sometimes can't always make it to the microphone, but we will come back.
Yeah. Yeah, more ideas than time.
Yes, definitely.
So before we dive into all the symbolism and folklore and history of the bluebell, I'm going to give you some quick facts about the flower. Number one, in the UK, bluebells are protected by the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981. It is against the law to intentionally uproot bluebells, and you could be fined up to 5 grand per bulb. It's not protected in Ireland, but that doesn't mean you should go and uproot them.
Far out. £5,000. That's like 10,000 Australian dollars per
Yeah,
bulb. Wow.
yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Number two, bluebell flowers are rich with pollen and nectar, so they're an absolute hit with bumblebees. Number three, bluebell colonies take a long time to establish. Seeds take around 5 years to reach flowering size. Number four, almost half of the world's bluebells are found in the UK. They are relatively rare elsewhere in the world. Number five, in a 2015 spring poll by botanical charity Plant Life, bluebells were voted the favourite wildflower of England.
That's so cute.
Yeah, and I think that's totally valid. Like they're gorgeous. I'm going to kick off with the etymology of the bluebell because the bluebell has many names. Now I'm going to say it really slowly, but the scientific name is Hyacinthoides nonscripta. There are so many common names, and so I've just pulled out a few of my favourite, so I didn't like read them all. But a couple of my favourites are cuckoo's boots, granther griggles, witch's thimbles, lady's nightcap, blue rockets, fairy flower. We've also got crow's toes. the spelling of it looks like it's probably a Scots word, but I'm not sure which parts of Scotland this was used in. But I know there's so many regional names, so we'll put maybe something up on our stories on Instagram, and you can share what regional name you know for bluebells. The Brief Life of Flowers by Fiona Stafford was one of the books that I use quite a lot for this episode. It's an absolutely gorgeous book, and you absolutely should get it. And so I'm going to talk a bit about how it got its scientific name. So Fiona says, the bluebell's ancient embodiment of sorrow is recalled in its botanical label, Hyacinthoides nonscripta. The unusual name derives from the melancholy myth of Apollo's love for a beautiful young man called Hyacinthus. So, in the Metamorphoses, which is a narrative poem by Roman poet Ovid, he tells the tale of Apollo, who is immortal. He is the god of the sun, music, poetry, and healing. And this guy, he loves discus throwing, which gave me such a flashback to school. Did you ever, at school, did you throw a discus?
I don't want to talk about it, Sarah. I do not want to talk about yeah, no. Yes, I did. We had to do, I don't know why, but for some
No.
reason we had to do javelin and discus. And I
Yes.
remember thinking, like, these teachers just hate me. They just hate me. They want to humiliate. Anyway, I then managed to get out of PE for an entire year after that.
Oh my
I'm
God.
never doing PE again.
That's
Yeah.
so valid. But yeah, not Apollo. He loved it. He would have got A plus in PE. And it turns out that discus is also a type of fish too, which I don't think I
Oh,
knew.
there you go.
Anyway, Apollo, he loves Hyacinthus, but Zephyrus also loves Hyacinthus. And Zephyrus is the god of the west wind and the messenger of spring. And he's jealous. So when Apollo next throws a discus, he whips up a wicked wind and it catches the discus and it whirls the disc into Hyacinthus's head. And Apollo is distraught. And in his grief, he wants to make Hyacinthus immortal. And he does this by turning the blood that pours from his beloved's head, it like pours into the earth. And then he turns this blood into bluebell roots. And then the bluebell springs up. And it is a permanent mark for his grief. And yeah, isn't that just beautiful and very dramatic? And then Fiona Stafford says English bluebells, also known as wild hyacinths, have no markings on the flowers or their leaves, and hence their botanical name, non-scripta or not inscribed. So isn't that just beautiful how it got its name?
Um, I don't know. I'd say it's beautiful. I think it's really depressing. Like, I'm just gonna kill someone and then turn them into a flower so that you can't have them. I don't know. I feel like there may have been a more diplomatic solution, but
Okay,
okay.
maybe beautiful wasn't the right word. Isn't it very poetic?
Yeah, it's definitely got drama vibes going with it. So yeah.
And before we get any deeper into the episode, I just want to talk about bluebells versus harebells. There can be some confusion. So there's a plant in Scotland that in the past has been referred to as the Scottish bluebell or the bluebell of Scotland. And this isn't referring to the English bluebell, it's referring to the harebell. And I can see like why there is confusion because whilst if you know flowers, you would look at it and you know it's not a bluebell, but it does have bell-shaped flowers and they're like bluey, kind of purpley. So I understand the confusion. They're actually a type of campanula and they're not at all related to the English bluebell, but just wanted to put that out there before we dive in any deeper. And I was trying to be quite conscious of all the research I was doing to make sure it was about bluebells and not, some harebell folklore sneaking in. So, Keely, you're not really familiar with bluebells at all, are you?
I literally just looked them up then to see what they looked like because I'm not sure that I had the correct image in my head. But I was looking up harebell and then bluebell to kind of compare them. No, I don't know if we have the genuine bluebell here. Perhaps we do, and I just don't know it.
Okay, so I did do a little bit of research, but I'll come to that in a second. So, For the people who aren't familiar with bluebells, it is a spring flower, so its season is normally mid-April to late May, and this is very dependent on the weather. And so um, climate change may start affecting its flowering season. Across the UK, it's very variable as to when they'll pop out. Scotland tends to be later than other parts of the UK. If the spring is really mild, they can bloom really early. You will often find bluebells in fields, in gardens, and sometimes even hedgerows. We are going to talk a little later on about how gardening has had an impact on bluebells. The most common place to find them is in old and ancient woodlands. And bluebells are a really important flower because they can be an indicator that the woodland is an ancient woodland. And so, yeah, they're a mighty flower and just like really important. I did have a quick look to see if there's any in Australia. And we will talk about this later on, but it's been documented that there's Spanish bluebells in Australia. And we're going to talk about Spanish bluebells at the very end of this episode. But yeah, that's interesting that I, I can't imagine a world where I don't know what bluebells are. And so this feels really magical that I get to tell you all about them.
I mean, I do, I know of them. I know that they exist, and I'm sure if I saw them in a picture book, I'd be like, oh, I know that that's a bluebell. But when we're talking about bluebells, I could not picture it in my head. I was seeing an upside down kind of like blue daffodil. Like, that's wrong. That's really
Oh.
wrong. So I had to look it up. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. So they have quite an iconic lean to them. So they're a straight up stem, and then they have you sometimes see it referred to as a shepherd's crook, and so it kind of leans over, and there's loads of little bells per stem, and you can have as many as like 16 little bells to each stalk. So they're very delicate, really beautiful. I'm going to tell you what the Victorians thought of them in The Language of Flowers. So, from Margaret Pixton's The Language of Flowers, she says that the bluebells represent constancy, which means being faithful and dependable. And I know you can say this about so many flowers, but I think it fits so well with the bluebell because they return each spring every year. And I think that they do feel like a dependable flower. And I feel like when spring comes around, people in the UK are so desperate for spring. Like, yeah, it feels like a really fitting description for the bluebell. And then from Jessica Rue's book, she says that the bluebell meanings are humility and faithfulness, which I think is lovely. And then she went on further to say the bluebell's appearance inspired its associations with humility and faithfulness. The tranquil bell-shaped flowers bow down on the stem, shying away from the sunshine as though showing contrition.
Oh, that's cute. They're bowing down. Yeah, they do have that humble feeling. I quite like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's gorgeous. So the bluebell has loads of interesting uses, and it made me really happy knowing how useful it was. And that's all kind of disappeared. Like it is now just enjoyed for its beauty. And I think that's just as valid. But I really enjoyed finding out how useful it was. So, just to say, the bulbs are poisonous. We would never ever advise you on using any of the plants we talk about as medicine. So, yeah, putting that out there, very poisonous. So, one of the uses, this was back in the Bronze Age, you can get a sticky sap from the bluebell, and this was used by hunters. So they created a glue from the sap to attach feathers to their arrows when they're hunting prey. They've also been used in book binding. So the sap was used to bind the pages to the spines of the books. And because the bluebell is poisonous, it meant the sap was really toxic, and so it stopped insects from attacking the bindings.
Wow.
Their bulbs were also crushed to create a starch, and this was used during the Elizabethan and Victorian periods. And it was used on the collars and sleeves to stiffen them. So, you know, when you see like that kind of big ruff around someone's neck, it might have been a bluebell starch that created that really, yeah, stiff texture. So this was all from Christine Iverson's Hedgerow Apothecary, and I also did a bit more research around folk medicine. So it was used as protection against animals and insects, and as well as like treating spider bites, treating leprosy and TB. I even saw one reference of Bluebell somehow preventing nightmares, and I don't know if that was more folklore and whimsy rather than them actually ingesting or using it as a treatment. I don't know. So that was quite interesting. And then also there was a few references to bluebells being used in HIV and cancer testing. So there's a biologically active compound in bluebells. This is what defends them against animals and insects. And there's been research into whether these compounds can be used for treatment against HIV and cancer. I couldn't see if these trials had been successful and whether it's been developed into a treatment, but I thought it's quite interesting to know that these tiny, beautiful little flowers potentially can be life-changing.
I love that. That sounds so spot on. If it is true, it just wouldn't. I don't think it would surprise me that much that such a beautiful, contrite looking flower could be so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, I think I remember in the Hellebore episode, the arrows, they did a similar thing with Hellebore tincture to make it a poisonous arrow. I think it was Hellebore.
It does ring a bell, and I think it is fascinating how resourceful people used to be.
Mm. Yeah, right. Like they didn't have ChatGPT. Just check with ChatGPT. What to like, add to our arrows? They just figured stuff out. And
We are now finally going to discuss the sounds of bluebells ringing. And this is a phrase that I came across loads. And the most common belief was that if a human heard the bluebells ringing, it meant they were going to be kidnapped by a malevolent fairy, which is just excellent. I mean, it's not.
I'm okay with that. Would be kind of fun.
Could be kind of fun. People believed that bluebells would ring and it would summon fairies back at dawn so then they could slumber amongst the bluebells. And there were loads of mentions of children being kidnapped. And I saw someone refer to this as being pixie-led. Isn't that just so whimsical? And yeah, I loved it. And so there is this association with being able to hear the bluebells and that maybe being ominous. But I wanted to add something else to it that I didn't read too much about, that en masse they have a really strong fragrance. It is hard to describe. I would say it smells kind of green and quite honey and sweet. It's very heady, quite old lady perfume. It can be when when it's really en masse, it's strong. So when you see a whole carpet of them, because that's how they grow, they'll, if they're left undisturbed, they turn into a whole carpet in the woodland. So it can really affront your senses. And I think there is so much folklore about them, these fairies and bluebells kind of luring people and enchanting them. And I totally get it. Like that could easily happen if you're on your own in a woodland that's kind of, a bit hidden, you're kind of closed in by the canopy of the trees, and there's just this huge carpet of bluebells that smell gorgeous, look beautiful. It would be easy to get lost. This is speculation, but the old wives' tales of being stolen by fairies amongst the bluebells, it quite possibly could be that it was to discourage children to not pick and consume poisonous flowers, and also probably stop them from getting lost. Like it's easy to get lost in the woods, and these tales came into existence before concrete roads and footpaths were commonplace. And so we know that bluebells are the sign of ancient forests, and the forests in the UK now are much more fragmented and smaller than they would have been. And I'm sure getting lost in the woods would have been a real scare. The UK used to have predators as well before we annoyingly wiped them all out. So there would have been wolves and things like that. And so I think these I think these old wives' tales, they kind of make sense as to why they want to dissuade kids from running amok in the forests and going too far. And there is this real connection with this flower. It always ties back to childhood. And I think that, yeah, there's this real sense of, yes, it's a gorgeous spring flower, but there's also, for adults, there's a sense of like loss of childhood or whimsy that is associated with the bluebell. And I found that really fascinating. And this brings me to the fairies because fairies are so like closely linked with bluebells. And again, this I refer back to Fiona Stafford's The Brief Life of Flowers. In pre-Enlightenment British culture, fairy folk were mysterious, unpredictable, and they weren't what we know of as like fairies nowadays. They weren't a good sign, and they were also known as the Fae or Fae folk in European folklore and Celtic and Germanic traditions. And Fiona writes, only the bravest or most foolhardy of mortals would ring bluebells to summon the fairies, and if anyone were unlucky enough to hear the bluebells ringing in the woods, it meant that death was coming.
That's creepy.
Yeah, it's chilling.
Super chilling. Yeah. Yeah, that's very creepy.
Yeah. And English fairies began to lose their more dangerous character. This was around the 18th century, and they began to be an inspiration to children's writers and illustrators around the 19th and 20th century. And this is when we start to see clothes and hats being made from like bluebell flowers. And we are going to discuss this later on. But Cicely Mary Barker's Bluebell Fairy is like the depiction of this more kind and whimsical fairy that was a real shift in culture away from this more sinister, like fae folk story. So, yeah, we'll come to that later. But Fiona Stafford speculated that Peter Pan may owe something to J.M. Barrie's Scottish childhood, but its immediate inspiration was Bluebell and Fairyland. Have you ever heard of Bluebell and Fairyland, Keely?
No, I haven't.
So I hadn't either, and it sounds like something that is going to be right up our street. So it was a hit West End musical of Christmas in 1901, and the storyline is about a London flower seller called Bluebell.
That's so sweet.
And we learn all about flower sellers in our Violet episode. So go and listen to that if you haven't already. And in the story, Bluebell hasn't sold enough flowers to purchase Christmas gifts for her sister. She visits Fairyland in her dreams. And honestly, it sounded very weird and whimsical. But she wakes up, and in the end, all is well. And yeah, it shocked me that I'd never heard of it. I'm going to need to I mean, this isn't going to be something that's accessible anymore, but we should get the script and put on a play.
That would be so cute. A little radio production.
Oh my gosh, gorgeous.
That'd be so sweet.
Oh, we could do that.
We should do.
Yeah,
See what I mean? Too many ideas. Not enough time.
too many ideas. But there will be more fairy chat in the art and literature section later on. So there is this association with bluebells and bad luck as well. And so there are plenty of records of people saying never bring bluebells into the house because it's considered bad luck. And unsurprisingly, it was also considered bad luck to trample bluebells, and this was in case fairies were sleeping amongst them. And this superstition actually has an unexpected benefit because it has protected these quite delicate plants. Bluebells are easily damaged, especially if trampled. And now they are not just protected by the fairies, but also by UK law too. So, yeah, as discussed in the facts, it is illegal to pick wild bluebells. And I think that is a very good thing.
Definitely.
And then on the flip side, because this is so common that,
Wait, is it illegal to pick bluebells? I know you said you can't remove the bulbs, so you can't like uproot a bulb. But does that mean you can't cut bluebell
so
stems?
do you know what? Yeah, I had the exact same thought and I had a quick Google and definitely under the Countryside Act, it's really explicit about bulbs. And I don't know if it's just people who've got confused and said it applies to the stems as well. But I couldn't get a concrete answer. So the people who know more than me, please let us know.
Mm.
But I think err on the side of
Yeah,
caution
for
and
five
just don't
thousand
pick
pounds a
them.
bulb, not worth it, but like,
Yeah, not worth it. And if they're in your own garden, fine, do whatever. Um, Although actually I don't think that applies to bulbs. I think even landowners can't dig up bulbs. I could be wrong about that. So
wow, okay.
if you do have Yeah, if you have bluebells in your garden and you want to do something with them, go read up on the law and see whether you'd get in trouble. I don't know.
Crazy.
Um, but yeah, just to be on the safe side, don't pick bluebells. Although, if you really want to pick a bluebell, I do have a solution for you, and we're going to discuss it later on in the episode.
Ooh, intriguing.
So, on the flip side, because we'll often see that certain flowers are considered bad luck, but also they're good luck. And so, in Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, he recommends that if you need some good fortune, you can place a bluebell in your shoe and you have to say the following: Bluebell, bluebell, bring me some luck before tomorrow night. And he's unsure whether you need to wear your shoe as well with the bluebell inside or whether you can just put it in overnight and then take it out the next morning. But I also feel like that's such a rubbish phrase. I was expecting some alliteration. I suppose there is a bit of alliteration or a rhyming couplet.
It's a bit lazy, isn't it? It's like just can't really be bothered to
Yeah,
put much thought into this saying.
yeah, absolutely. So, and I would say it's probably not good luck now to do it because maybe you're
Yeah.
gonna get fined.
Yeah. Five K per shoe.
And from Christine Iverson's Hedgerow Apothecary, she wrote that some people believe that wearing a wreath made of the flowers, then it would ensure the wearer would only be able to tell the truth. And I thought that was quite interesting because I mean, I've put that under the good fortune section, but actually, that's probably not good fortune if you're being quizzed on whether you've done something wrong.
Yeah. It's like that movie Liar Liar, and he can't lie at all, and it
Yeah.
gets him in all sorts of trouble. It's quite
Mm.
funny.
And others thought that if you could turn one of the flowers inside out without tearing it, you would eventually win the heart of the one you love.
I feel like I've been doing life all wrong. I just haven't like connected with the flowers and figured out the law that I'm meant to be following.
And then just to take the episode a bit darker, I saw quite a few references with bluebells and death.
Sure. Yeah, that checks out.
And so bluebells were often planted on graves as they represented rebirth and could give comfort to grieving relatives. And this made me think of snowdrops and how they became associated with death because they were planted by monks but near churches and graves. And so there was this connection with snowdrops and death. And it's interesting that there's also bluebells and death. And I think it's quite easy to look at it as like quite dark, but I think we should flip it on the head and see it as it is a comfort.
Well, it's a reminder of life is fleeting. I don't know. I always feel like that when I look at flowers, especially delicate ones like blossoms or bluebells give me that kind of vibe too, just
Yeah,
looking at their images. They're just so delicate and so fragile, and they're not meant to last forever.
yeah,
And neither are we. So maybe
yeah.
it's, yeah,
No, I agree actually. That's what makes flowers so beautiful is that it's fleeting. And I suppose you can apply that to life as well. So we are in the UK approaching Beltane, which is the Gaelic May Day festival. It marks the beginning of summer and it's the midway point of the spring equinox and the summer solstice. And it's usually held around the 1st of May. Historically, it's been observed in Ireland, Scotland, the Isle of Man. It's one of the four main Gaelic seasonal festivals, which are Samhain, Imbolc, and Lunasa. Imbolc is the world coming to life again, and then by Beltane, there's flowers, there's buzzing insects, there's sunshine, there's energy, leaves on trees. Although, probably in Scotland there's also rain, but let's not dwell on that. And spirits or fairies are thought to be particularly active at Beltane, similar to Samhain. And I think that's why I associate Beltane with bluebells. And I was doing some research, really excited to find out the connection with Bluebell and Beltane. And this is mostly to say that traditionally I don't think they were associated with Beltane. And we're halfway through spring when Beltane occurs, and I see Bluebell as the spring flower. So that's obviously where I've made the connection. But I figured let's just have a little chat about Beltane. And so activities would often include things that are quite associated with spring flowers. So you would decorate your home with mayflowers. Often they would be yellow ones. In parts of Ireland, people made a May bush, and this is typically a thorn bush or branch that's decorated with flowers, ribbons, painted eggshells, which sounds utterly gorgeous. Like, I really want to do that. And holy wells would also be visited, while Beltane dew was thought to bring beauty and maintain youthfulness.
It all sounds so beautiful and lovely. I
Um,
love that you have those sort of festivals over there.
yeah, and I do remember growing up, we used to go to May Day every year, and it's going to sound so weird when I describe it to you, but there would be a big pole and Morris dancers, and you'd wrap like the ribbon around the maypole, and there'd be loads of dancing. And I remember, and this is so bad, but there used to be like different stalls where you could like throw things at the coconut to try and knock the coconuts down, and you'd be able to win fish, which is diabolical. Yeah, I remember I won a gold. I think me and my sister over the years would have won a couple of goldfish. And I do remember, so me and my sister, our whole family's obsessed with animals. I'm fairly sure one of the fish that we won, we gave it to our next door neighbour, and she kept putting it in a bigger and bigger tank, and it kept growing to suit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it just carried on growing because every time it got a bigger tank, it was just like, oh, this is nice.
It's like that Dr. Seuss book.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Can't,
my gosh.
I think it was maybe called Lionel. I don't know. That's
Oh,
anyway.
that's the best name for a goldfish. I love it.
Yeah, and it did make me think because they come from koi, right? Anyway, this is so completely off topic. Th this is just to talk about Beltane, which also isn't actually about bluebells, but it's about spring flowers. So I feel like I'm allowed to chat about it. But this is just a little bit of a side note to our listeners that Keely and I have been thinking about starting a Patreon or something similar where we can try and cover the costs of running this podcast. And we've thought about maybe doing bonus episodes, and we've got a few ideas for bonus episodes. But I'm clearly desperate to talk about the Wheel of the Year and the festivals associated. So I would love to do some bonus episodes on like the flowers that you can use for these festivals. Yeah, but we've got loads of ideas, and so yeah, we're keen. We're really keen to keep this project running as long as possible, but it can be quite time consuming. And Keely and I both are florists and have lots of irons in the fire. Is that the right saying?
Yes.
And so, yeah, we would just love a way to make the podcast really sustainable. So if you would want to sign up to a Patreon and get bonus content, or if there's other ways that you want more from us, yeah, let us know what your thoughts are and would be all ears.
Yes, because the other option that we talked about is potentially having sponsorship and running ads through the episodes, but we would love not to do that if we could. But we're open to hearing from you, our listeners, as well, to know if you would prefer ads or if you would be more happy to keep the episodes ad free and support us through Patreon or something similar. We'd just be open to having a conversation with you because we do this podcast for you as much as us. So yeah, let us know what you're thinking there.
Absolutely. As I've mentioned a few times already, bluebells are quite closely associated with childhood. And there was a rhyme that I came across, and I just wanted to share it with you. So it'd be a playground chant, and it was called Dusty Bluebells, and this definitely hints at fairy lore. So there was a few different names that it's called. So In and Out the Dusting Bluebells, also known as In and Out the Dusty, or Dusky Bluebells. So yeah, various different names. I imagine it's quite regional, and it's thought that the game wasn't actually formed until the early 20th century, and it seemed to be particularly popular during the 1960s and the 1970s. I imagine that it's not played anymore. But the first reference of this rhyme or song was by Alice Gomme, and that was in 1898 in her book, The Traditional Games of England, Ireland, and Scotland. And the author, Karen Maitland, speculated that the song might be a reference to the folklore about bluebells, in particular, that a bluebell wood in bloom would be seen as an enchanted place where fairies would live, and that if a child picked bluebells alone, they could be spirited away by the fairy folk. And so, Keely, I thought it'd be quite sweet if you would like to read the two verses of the song. And along with these verses, I've got the description of what the children are meant to do. So I'll read what the children are meant to do, and then you read the verse. The children form a circle holding hands with arms raised to form an arch between each child. A child chosen to start the dance begins to weave in and out of the arches, singing.
In and out the dusty bluebells, in and out the dusty bluebells, in and out the dusty bluebells, who will be my master?
The child stops on the word master and begins to tap on the shoulder of the nearest child in the circle, singing.
Pitter patter on my shoulder, pitter patter on my shoulder, pitter patter on my shoulder, you will be my master.
The tap child now joins with the dancer and begins to weave through the arches with the original child holding on behind. And then, yeah, it's repeated until another child is chosen, etc., etc.
That's so cute.
Yeah, isn't it sweet? And I just thought it was quite nice that there was, yeah, this maybe slightly sinister side to it, that it is weaved in with folklore about being stolen by fairies.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's speculated that the master is referring to the fairy folk when they get stolen.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit creepy, but it's also, but a lot of that stuff is creepy. A lot of the older tales or like the Grimm's fairy tales and like they're all actually really dark when you look into them. So it's not that surprising.
Yeah, and what was that? I don't know if you would have had it, but the
Like the Ring a Rosies, like that's based on
yes,
some
that was about the
plague, wasn't it? The Black
yes.
Plague.
I think it I think it was the plague of England. Yeah, and do you know, actually, this is so completely off topic. So I'm from Derbyshire, which I've probably mentioned a few times, but there is an incredible story. There's like a plague village, like in Derbyshire, called Eyam in Derbyshire, and there's this story about how they self-isolated and they put a ring around their village, and so people wouldn't come in. And the way the plague came to them is from London. There was cloth that was delivered, and it was believed that there was insects or fleas or something within the cloth, and that's how it spread to Derbyshire. There has been there's been a lot of speculation whether they chose to self-isolate or whether the wealthy landowners forced them to, so then they wouldn't contaminate other people. But it is quite tragic, and I think the Victorians romanticized quite a lot of it. So it's also the speculation there whether they, because there's supposedly like this love story between someone who was on the outside of the ring and someone who was inside the village. And yeah, there's a couple podcasts that I've listened to about it. So I can find a link. I can find a link and put them in the show notes if you'd be interested in that. But yeah, I don't. How did we even get onto that? Anyway, oh yeah, the plague.
That's what these episodes do. They just bring up so many other interesting
Yeah.
connections.
So we're going to stick with the theme of fairies and we're going to take a look at some of the art and literature that has been inspired by bluebells. And so we are going to start, obviously, with Cicely Mary Barker because I just love her work so much. So, Keely, do you want to describe the Bluebell Fairy?
They're a bit fancy, actually. And they're wearing what looks almost like a medieval jester's tunic, I want to say. And it's green and blue. I'm assuming it's sort of the green actually looks like he's wearing leaves or she's wearing leaves. And she has the most gorgeous lilac wings with green edging. And the fairy is standing in a bluebell wood, it looks like, surrounded by other bluebells, and it's holding one bluebell straight ahead of it with it has like, I don't know, it looks like about 12 different bluebell buds sort of out spraying out over the top of it. And it's got a hand on the fairy has their hand on their hips and they just look very regal.
Yeah, regal is a perfect word. And there's a few things that I found quite interesting about it. So I think the green bit on the front of the tunic, they do look like the shape of bluebell leaves. So I imagine that's what they're meant to be. And then the little headband, to me, it looks like the stamen from inside a bluebell. But the actual flowers, they are quite a long bell. Like turning them inside out would be quite tricky, right?
Yeah, I don't see how it's possible.
And
Yeah.
I thought it was quite interesting that the stem of this bluebell is actually fairly straight and it's not got the iconic hooked stem that you see most of the time. So I think that means that a it's quite early in the flowering season before it's like properly opened all the buds, and you can see the buds at the very top of the bluebell haven't fully opened up. So I think eventually it would then start to lean over. It's been documented that Barker did use real samples when she was doing her artwork. So she would work with Kew Gardens used to send over samples. So she would have used a real specimen to draw this flower. And it's from this particular fairy is from the Flower Fairies of the Spring, which was published in 1923. And this was the very first book that she published. And she received £25 for this collection.
Wow. I wonder if that was good back then.
Yeah, I wonder. I should have looked up to see whether that was considered. I mean, I feel like it probably wasn't. I'm sure she got shafted,
Like all artists, but yeah.
right? And I was really keen to find, so I'm obsessed with Tolkien, and I was really keen to find a link with Bluebells and the Shire. And I really thought there was going to be a link. And maybe they're featured in the films. I didn't do that much research to go and rewatch them. But there was one tenuous link that I thought just seemed a bit too magical to not share. So Belle Gamgee was a hobbit in the Shire, and she married Hamfast Gamgee, which is Samwise's dad. And it's speculated on various forums for Tolkien and Lord of the Rings that Belle was possibly named after bellflowers, which could have been a bluebell or a harebell. So there's a very tenuous link, but I've managed to get a bit of Tolkien into the episode. And then I thought, as a bit of contrast, to see what kind of modern media makes use of bluebells, there is Pixie Hollow. And this isn't something that I had come across, but it's a game by Disney, and there is a fairy named Bluebell. And I found this really weird, but her favorite flowers were crocuses rather than bluebells, which I thought was quite weird. But Pixie Hollow was an online game. It was role playing and it ran from 2008 to 2013. And it was part of the Disney Fairies world, which completely passed me by. Have you heard of it?
No, and I can't believe it's like over. We missed it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it's rude.
I know. And I love fairies, so I don't know how that passed me by. But yeah, so there's Bluebell the fairy who love crocuses.
Sure.
And then obviously there's going to be something about Beatrix Potter. So bluebells do seem to be so closely tied with childhood. And one of my favourite authors from when I was a kid, was obviously Beatrix Potter. And she included these flowers in her work. And for once, I'm not going to be focusing on her shorter tales, which are the ones we've kind of used for previous episodes. I'm going to tell you all about the Fairy Caravan. Keely, have you read the Fairy Caravan?
No, I haven't heard of it, but I'm really excited. Keep going.
Okay, so I only came across it when I started researching bluebells 4 years ago. So I did actually read it 4 years ago, but I'd forgotten quite a lot of the story actually. And it's Potter's only full-length novel. And I think it's aimed at slightly older children than her shorter stories. And according to Leslie Linder, and he is a scholar and collector, and he left the V&A nearly 2,500 drawings, first edition books, manuscripts, etc., etc. So he's like this ma like a massive collector of Beatrix Potter and just knows so much about her. He said, Potter did not wish for an English edition of the Fairy Caravan because she felt the stories were too personal, too autobiographical to publish in this country.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought it's quite fascinating. And when I tell you about the story, you're going to be like, how is this autobiographical? Because the story follows the adventures of Tuppenny, yeah, a young guinea pig who runs away from home to join a traveling circus.
Oh my gosh. I'm in love.
Right? So the woods and estate surrounding Braithwaite Hall in the Lake District, Cumbria, are the backdrop for Potter's stories, and they were also a favourite walking spot for Wordsworth. So I have pulled the description of the story. So Tuppenny, the guinea pig, sets out from home, determined to start a new life. Soon he comes across a miniature travelling circus where he meets Sandy, the Highland Terrier, Jenny Ferret, Paddy Pig, and Pony Billy, who welcome him into their company. Tuppenny and his new friends travel the countryside, performing for the animals of the farms and fields, and share many magical adventures along the way, such as the day Paddy Pig gets lost in the enchanted woods.
That is adorable. And I need to order, add to cart.
Yes, I got an ebook of it and it wasn't too expensive. So, what does this have to do with bluebells? Cumbria will have been full of bluebells when Potter was living and working there. In her writings, she described them as like a bit of sky come down, which is just
That's so
gorgeous.
beautiful.
And you do often see bluebells, like when you have like a carpet of bluebells, you see them described as like a sea of bluebells. And I just think it's fascinating that her mind went to the sky
Mm,
and it was the sky coming down rather than it being water. Just gorgeous.
I love that.
So Potter uses old superstitions around bluebells within the story. Tuppenny, the guinea pig, and his friends go round and round a bluebell wood in a horse-drawn caravan for hours before they're finally able to find their way out.
I want to have a guinea pig called Tuppeny.
I know. And there are, even in the ebook, there's some images that go alongside it, and it's very cute. But I just love the idea that it's not just humans who get enchanted by bluebells. Even gorgeous little creatures can get enthralled.
Love that. I wonder if the autobiographical part was it some sort of was she either being sarcastic or was it an allegory? So she was Tuppeny the guinea pig who was lost and trying to find her way in life and befriending people and eventually finding her way. I don't know. I haven't read it, but I'm just trying to connect how it was too personal
Yeah,
and what she meant by that.
yeah. So that's quite interesting. And I listened to a podcast the other week about Beatrix Potter's life. And it was by two walkers who are like based in Cumbria, and they talk about different walks that you can go on and the history and the people associated with the Lake District. And so the podcast was gorgeous. It's all about Beatrix Potter. So I'll share a link to that so people can have a listen and they can see whether they can spot any relation to the fairy caravan in within her life. Bluebells also feature in her other work. So Martin McDowell, who wrote Beatrix Potter's Gardening Life, wrote that the bluebell bedecked wood up the lane behind Castle Cottage makes an appearance in the Tale of Mr. Todd, in which Benjamin Bunny notes the difference between their sweet smell and the musky scent emanating from Mr. Todd's stick house. The scene reappears in Cecily Parsley's nursery rhymes. As their name implies, English bluebells are native to this green and pleasant island.
So cute.
I know, isn't it?
I have to say, I loved Beatrix Potter, but I also found it a very stressful stories because the animals were always in trouble.
Yeah, I remember the rat one being quite dark as well. Harebells are mentioned in William Shakespeare in the play Cymbeline, which isn't a play that I'm familiar with. However, it is debated that Shakespeare actually meant the bluebell, and this is because the harebells are mentioned alongside pale primroses, and these are a flower that their flowering period is closer to bluebells rather than harebells. But obviously, this is speculation, and I just thought it was an interesting little note to include. Whilst researching this episode, I came across an artist that I wasn't familiar with called Helen Allingham. She was a British artist and she specialised in watercolours, and she was an illustrator in the Victorian era. And this is going to mean nothing to you, Keely, but she was born in Swadlincote, which is in Derbyshire, and that is super close to where I grew up. And I'm fairly sure that my brother-in-law used to work in Swad as well. So it's just really cool that we've got a Midlands artist on the podcast. And she was also a friend of Kate Greenaway, who was an inspiration for Cicely Mary Barker. There's two paintings that I've pulled, and they are quite similar, but yeah, I'll get you to describe the first one, Keely.
The first painting is very, very soft. It almost looks like an out of focus photograph. It's got a haze color to it that makes me think it's like either very early morning or sunset. And it there are two people, it looks like a mother and a daughter, walking through a wood on a footpath that's just not been made by concrete, but just, a well-worn footpath through a bluebell carpet of bluebells on either side of the path and some gorgeous trees behind them. And it looks like they are carrying posies in their hands, but they're pink flowers, so they haven't been picking the bluebells.
Do you know what? I hadn't actually. I looked at their hands and thought, oh yeah, maybe they're carrying flowers. But that's actually a really nice note that you've added that it's implied that they've not been picking bluebells, which we know is not a good thing. So yeah, that I love that. And that was painted. I don't think there's an exact date. It just said before 1926. And then there was another one that was painted before 1927, and this one's actually called Bluebells, and it is part of a private collection. And I would say it's quite similar, but Keely, do you want to describe this one as well?
This one is a similar landscape in that it's got the tall trees in the background and then the bluebell carpets in the foreground with a footpath in the middle. But this time there's a mother or a mother figure with two children. One she's carrying in her arms, and the other one is behind her on the path. And it looks like she is actually bending down to pick some bluebells. And the mother looks like she's turning her head behind her as if to say, don't touch them. Well, that's my interpretation.
And I thought it's quite interesting that we've just chatted about Shakespeare and bluebells growing alongside primroses because there's also a smattering of yellow flowers. And I wonder, they look like they're shorter than the bluebells, so I wonder if they are meant to be primroses as
Mm.
well.
But don't you think it looks like the girl in the background is picking the bluebells?
Yeah, yeah, cheeky.
Naughty. You're going to get taken by fairies.
But I thought it was quite nice as well that it was an example of what paths would have looked like, and it'd be easy to get lost and um, like walk away from the path without realizing. And then I just wanted to mention a more contemporary artist because we do often look back to older periods, and I think that's great. But I just wanted to have a living artist mentioned on the podcast as well. So I came across Lucy Lovehart's work, and it is just so delightful. So, Keely, do you want to describe the Bluebell artwork?
It's really sweet. It almost looks like a Polaroid shape, I would say. So it's a square shape of like a watercolor paper, textured paper, with just a really sweet drawing of a bluebell with the shepherd's hook arm of the stem, and then four bluebells just hanging off it, and then the green leaves. And underneath it just says bluebell written in really just that classic handwriting. So it's very obviously handmade, and then a beautiful, looks like a love heart crystal sticker at the
Yeah,
end of that. So it's really sweet. I love that.
it is lovely. And one of the reasons I ended up picking this was because it described using glitter and gold within the artwork. And then there was just a little note saying, please note, we are now proud to say that all of our prints are hand decorated with sprinkles of eco-friendly, biodegradable vegan glitter and a little bit of magic.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, it made me think of you.
I couldn't see the sparkle. I'm now zooming in 200%. Okay, I can sort of see the Spark on that. Okay, I love it. I'm obsessed with this now.
It did say that Lucy is a keen supporter of those various different charities, but one of the charities that she supports is the Fairyland Trust. And so it just seemed to come full circle.
I love that.
There were multiple poems that I could have chosen. I think we're going to focus on just one, but I just wanted to note that the Bronte sisters, amongst them, seem to have quite a few poems about bluebells, ones that were maybe unpublished as well and just found after they'd died. But I wanted to talk about Anne Bronte, who wrote a poem called The Bluebell. This was published after she died, and I quite like this poem because it has, like, I don't know if I want to say darker, but it has a sadness to it. And it was written after she'd left to become a governess. And so she was experiencing homesickness as well as social anxiety. And it's speculated that this is what made her attentive to the silent eloquence of bluebells. And so she's unhappy and far from home, and she longed for happy childhood's hours when bluebells seemed like fairy gifts. And so this just seemed like a really appropriate poem. It's really long, so I'm not going to get you to read all of it, Keely. But I did wonder whether we could put the whole thing on Instagram if people wanted to read it. But I thought maybe if you read the first stanza, that could be quite sweet.
A fine and subtle spirit dwells in every little flower. Each one its own sweet feeling breathes, with more or less of power. There is a silent eloquence in every wild bluebell that fills my softened heart with bliss that words could never tell.
Isn't that gorgeous?
It's beautiful.
You read it so well that I kind of wish I'd made you read the entire poem.
Maybe that could be in a bonus episode.
Yeah, maybe. I am going to make you read one more stanza because I think it's beautiful.
Oh, that lone flower recalled to me my happy childhood's hours when bluebells seemed like fairy gifts, a prize among the flowers.
That's gorgeous.
It's so sweet.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I do think that sometimes I struggle with poetry, and I think what the disconnect is that I need to have it read to me. Like I like to be able to read along as someone is reading it, but I think poetry should be heard. And so this was lovely. I think I'm just going to get you to read every poem to me going forward.
It's like maybe that's a gig I could start doing.
I think we've alluded to this a few times in the episode, but bluebells can take years to recover from footfall damage. And if a bluebell's leaves are crushed, they die back from a lack of food and then they cannot photosynthesize. So if you want to engage with bluebells and find a nice woodland walk, it's really recommended that you stick to the paths. And I've come across some incredible bluebell woods in Scotland, and I always make an effort to not share the location. Like if I'm going to put a picture online, I'm not going to tag the location unless there's a few bluebell woods across Scotland that are managed by maybe the Wildlife Trust. There's a few that are like, promoted as like places to go, and then there'll be people there to kind of guide you. I think that's fine. But I think if you stumble across some bluebells, I know it sounds really selfish and like you're gatekeeping, but in reality, not everyone can be trusted to stick to the footpaths. So I think if you find a bluebell wood, you're allowed to keep it secret and keep it close to you. And I think it's quite easy to point fingers at people. And I know there was definitely a phase where you would see quite a lot of maybe influencers or people on social media who would want to go and do a photo shoot in Bluebell Woods. And yeah, it's like easy to be like, oh my gosh, people are so fickle to go do that. But this is not new. This is not a new occurrence. And it has been well documented that bluebells have attracted big crowds. And we're not the first generation to want to go and take photo shoots amongst the flowers. And so this was one of my favorite things to research, to be honest, because my partner Scott is really into trains, and it's not often that our interests cross over that much. But um, yeah, in again, The Brief Life of Flowers by Fiona Stafford, which is just a gorgeous book. Everyone should go and buy it. But she wrote the following. It is now relatively easy for many of us to reach a bluebell wood, but in the days when cars were rarer and the rail network far more extensive, some railway companies ran special trains to allow passengers to see the seasonal burst of bluebells along the line. And so I think there was more than one railway that offered this, but there was definitely the Bluebell Railway in Sussex, and it would run throughout it would run seasonally, so that you could go and see these woods of bluebells, and you'd be able to see them from the trains. But I think you could also get out at stops and go and see them, and it just yeah, like they've all been in decline. I think they closed the railways that offered this closed around the 50s and 60s, because it was just easier to go and access them with a car. But it's been a thing that people want to go and be in nature and go and enjoy these flowers. I think I'm sure I read somewhere that the Bluebell Railway had reopened and that it was offered as like an excursion, but I didn't make a note of that. So someone can go and research that and see if they can go on one of these trains. But yeah, I just thought it was really nice that actually bluebells have such an impact and they entice people out of their homes to go and be amongst them.
I love that so much. That's incredible. Bluebell Railway. What a cool idea.
Right? I mentioned earlier on about Spanish bluebells and how I think there's probably Spanish bluebells in Australia. I think Spanish bluebells are a good lesson in that flowers can't be contained and they don't care for your boundary line with your neighbour or with what is your garden and what isn't. And there's just no difference to a flower. Like it's going to grow where it can grow. And there is actually quite a big problem with Spanish bluebells. So it's thought that they would have been imported during the Victorian period, where everyone wanted to have them in their garden. And if you can think of the English bluebell, it has this gorgeous drooping stem, which is, quite an iconic shape, and it's described as a shepherd crook. And Spanish bluebells actually grow straighter up. They have shorter but like bigger bells, and you see them in different colours as well. I think the English bluebell is probably a bit darker, whereas the Spanish bluebell, you see it white, pale pinks, purplies. If you don't know flowers very well, it can be hard to tell the difference, but there is a big difference. So our native bluebell, it has a really strong scent, and Spanish bluebells don't have this scent. And English bluebells take a very long time to get established, whereas Spanish bluebells, they don't. They can spread really quickly and they can easily crossbreed with native bluebells as well. So it can really jeopardize our historic bluebell woods. And I have quite a lot of thoughts about this because plant blindness is a real thing, and I feel like there was someone who coined that term, and I'll find out who that is so I can credit them. But this isn't just about bluebells. This is just an issue. I mean, I know I'm aware of it as a thing in the UK. I imagine it's elsewhere that there is a lack of education around native fauna and flora. And I think this is only going to get worse. And I just think it's really tricky. Like it's a really tricky thing to discuss because I think we mentioned about the Bluebell Railway and how getting to Bluebells was quite inaccessible. And it's easy to be like, oh, it's easy to see bluebells now. You just hop in the car. But not everyone has access to a car. And so I think green spaces are becoming harder to access. I'm based in Glasgow. 73% of people in Glasgow live in a flat. And yes, I have a garden, but it's essentially just where the bins live. Nothing grows there because it's just boggy and damp. And yeah, I would say that like I don't have access to a garden to grow flowers. And I just think it's a tricky situation to be in because we are seeing these non-native Spanish bluebells really jeopardize English bluebells. and people don't know it's happening. Maybe some people do and don't care, but I think that it's a conversation we need to have. And it also, this is going to be quite niche, but it makes me think of Scottish wildcats. They are like really on the brink of extinction because they've been bred with domestic and feral cats, and we're losing a species. And because it's, seen as like this more niche, just kind of not, I don't know. I imagine some people don't see it as important, but we're going to lose a native species. And yeah, I think it's tricky to discuss because there's issues of access and education. And I just think we need to be better caretakers for our land. And I don't know what the solution is. This is me just being on a soapbox. But yeah, I think that's why I'm still so keen to always talk about Cicely Mary Barker, because that is a way that people can fall in love with nature without even having to leave their homes. And I think that's why I wanted to mention Pixie Hollow as well, which was this Disney game, because I think it's great if you play video games and you can engage with the natural world in, through different methods. It's not just having to step outside, because not everyone is able to step outside. And so, yeah, anyway, they're my thoughts. I would love to hear what people also think. And I just wanted to share, I know we talked about Beatrix Potter earlier, but there was a section in Martha McDowell's book that I just wanted to reference because I think she drew some really nice parallels. She's writing of English bluebells. They differ from the larger and arguably coarser Spanish bluebell, another species entirely. Like the local red squirrel, the English bluebell is a national treasure. Beatrix Potter would have appreciated the efforts that wildlife enthusiasts around the British Isles are undertaking to preserve them. Beatrix treasures wildflowers as part of nature, an extension of her own garden. To a visitor planning a trip in late May, she is encouraging, "It will be a lovely time to see the Lake District. If the bluebells are over, the foxgloves will be in flower, and I will show you the real woods and lanes." And I just thought I should end it on a positive note because there are plenty of people who care. That this is a topic amongst people who are enthusiastic about the native flowers of the UK and British Isles. And so yeah, we should end that on a positive note. But yeah, I just wanted to make people aware who maybe wouldn't be aware previously. So I mentioned earlier that if you want to pick a bluebell, then if you pick a Spanish bluebell, you are technically picking a weed. So if you're really keen to have bluebells in your home, go and identify what is a Spanish bluebell and bring them into your homes because they're not protected. Although I will say, I've dreamed of doing a floral headdress that is made with bluebells. And I was thinking, oh, a way to go about it would be to use Spanish bluebells. But I've always felt too fearful because then I feel like, what happens if people see me picking them, think that I'm picking English bluebells, and like they have a go at me? Or if online, maybe I'll get some hate because people will think they're English bluebells. But as I'm saying this, this is actually maybe what I should do because then people will learn. This
Mm.
could be an opportunity to teach people.
It might be a very worthwhile post to make because it's
Mm.
highlighting the difference between the two so that people can know that there is a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, this takes us really nicely into Keely and I are obviously both florists, and we like to talk about working with flowers within floristry. And I just have absolutely no experience with working with them because, grey area as to where you'd even get them from. But I did want to mention that there is a really gorgeous arrangement by Constance Spry, and this was in her book How to Do the Flowers. And this was obviously created so long ago that I imagine the law and access to bluebells was very different. So it is a black and white image, but this is the final thing I'll get you to describe, Keely. But do you want to describe the this gorgeous arrangement?
I would say it's iconic Constance Spry in terms of her vintage bowl. She always uses such lovely vessels that we do not that we they're not the sort of thing that we see a lot of these days. And she just has an explosion of it almost looks like a firework of bluebells coming out of this sugar bowl and looks like the white bluebells might be in the center. The description says it's blue, pink, and white. bluebells. So I think the white is in the middle, and then maybe the pink is behind it, and then the blue look like they're either side of it. Yeah, I would describe it as a firework of bluebells.
That's the perfect description. Yeah, you've summed it up so well. And I'm jealous that I don't get to make that arrangement, but it looks like messy, but in a good way. That's everything that I have on bluebells. So I really hope you enjoyed that, Keely. I love telling you about them, and so hopefully our listeners will have enjoyed that too.
I feel honoured that I got to be here to listen to the Bluebells episode, which has been in the works for 4 years. So it's amazing that that's done. You must feel incredible, and you should do something today to celebrate or reward yourself, because that's been a massive thing. And it's an incredible little flower, and I'm a bit jealous actually that we don't have them here, and they're not even something that I don't think they would ever really grow here. I think the climate is too different. But yeah, they seem really magical. So hopefully one day when I'm over there, I can come over in spring as well as in autumn, because I have a dream to go to Scotland in autumn, listeners. But maybe I need to go over in spring as well so that I
Yes.
can see beautiful English bluebell. But that's it for this episode. So we would love to hear from you. And we actually have a shiny new website, and you can find it at flowersandfolklorepodcast.com. And we have a little spot in there where you can actually leave us a voice note. So we would love to hear from you. If you don't want to leave a voice note, that is so fine. You can message us on Instagram. We are Flowers and Folklore Podcast on Instagram. You can message us over there, or you can follow us and subscribe to the episodes on Substack, which means every time we get a new episode out, it will appear right in your inbox. And that's at flowersandfolklore.substack.com. And you can also leave a comment on episodes there and start chatting with us, because we would love to hear from you. And you can tell us all about your own flower stories, whether it's about bluebells or a different flower altogether, your connection with flowers, whatever you want to share with us. We hear from people all over the world and their experience with flowers that are special to them and meaningful to them, and their stories, and we really can't get enough of it. All of these links are going to be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Come and find us online at all the different places. And of course, you can share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't do any of those things, that's fine. We're just so happy that you're here.